We remember a country great. We learned today that George Jones has died.
He said, "I love you till I die."
And legendary country musician and actor Glenn Campbell has died. He sold tens of millions of records over his long career.
Merle Haggard has won almost every major award a country music entertainer can win, and 28 of his recordings have been #1 on the country music sales charts.
They didn't just sing about whiskey, heartbreak, and hard living. They were the stories. Behind every twangy chorus and steel guitar riff was a storm brewing. Addictions, arrests, overdoses, betrayals, and sometimes even darker secrets. Some of these country legends weren't just performers. They were outlaws in the truest sense, dodging the DEA, crashing award shows drunk, spending millions chasing highs, and in one shocking case, taking a life. You've heard the songs. Now it's time to hear what they didn't put in the lyrics. Because once you find out what really happened behind the scenes, you'll never hear these classics the same way again. Section 1. Waylon Jennings, the outlaw who outsmarted the feds. Waylon Jennings wasn't just playing the part of a rebel, he was one. Long before he became a legend, he was rooming with Johnny Cash, popping pills like candy, and becoming a key player in Nashville's gritty underworld. He once admitted that pills were the artificial energy Nashville ran on, and he wasn't exaggerating. By the mid-70s, Waylon was deep into amphetamines, using so much that he was spending over $1,500 a day just to keep going. That kind of lifestyle doesn't come cheap, and it left him buried in $2.5 million worth of debt. But things reached a boiling point in 1977. A suspicious package tipped off the DEA, 27 grams of illegal substances, shipped directly to Jennings. Within hours, federal agents stormed his recording studio, ready to take him down. But Waylon wasn't new to the game. While the cops waited outside for a search warrant, he quietly flushed the evidence. By the time they got inside, there was nothing left. No charges, no bust. Just a legend growing bigger. Still, the damage was done. His addiction only got worse, and even though he tried to detox alone in a rented house in Phoenix, his idea of controlled use didn't last. He toured constantly to stay afloat, but the years of smoking, drugs, and bad habits caught up with him. His body started to shut down. Diabetes, obesity, and eventually, heart problems. In 2002, Waylon died in his sleep, not from a dramatic crash or overdose, but quietly, the same way he'd once dodged the law. And yet, for all the chaos he left behind, country fans still remember him as the man who lived by his own rules, until the very end. Section 2. Merle Haggard. From cell block to center stage. Merle Haggard's story didn't start with stardom. It started behind bars. Born during the Great Depression and raised in poverty, Merle was already getting arrested as a teenager. By his early 20s, he was doing hard time in San Quentin State Prison. Locked up, angry, and lost. But that's where everything changed. After watching Johnny Cash perform for the inmates, something clicked. Haggard decided he wasn't going to die in a cell. He was going to be on that stage. And he did it. After his release, he exploded onto the country music scene with raw, rebellious songs that spoke to the working class. He didn't just make hits, he made statements. While most artists avoided politics, Merle dropped songs that pushed back against the anti-war movement. Love him or hate him, you couldn't ignore him. But behind the tough guy image and outlaw anthems, the demons were still there. At 41, Haggard started smoking a dangerous substance, first casually, then obsessively. He blew $2,000 in just 5 months, chasing highs and hiding from his own fame. He eventually tried to quit, but like so many others, he went back to it. Despite the relapses, he kept performing, earning a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award and racking up 38 #1 country hits. But his body couldn't outrun the damage. In 2016, Merle Haggard died on his 79th birthday after battling double pneumonia, a quiet end for a man whose life was anything but. His legacy? A voice for the forgotten, a rebel who rose from prison walls to country halls, and proof that even the greatest comebacks can still be haunted by the past. Section 3. Charlie Rich. When success turns self-destructive. Charlie Rich wasn't your typical country star. His music blurred the lines between country, jazz, soul, and blues, and his smooth style earned him the nickname the Silver Fox. In the early 70s, he was on top of the world. 2 back-to-back hits, Behind Closed Doors and The Most Beautiful Girl, dominated the charts and even crossed over into pop. He took home 2 Grammys, and it looked like nothing could slow him down. But something was already unraveling behind the scenes. As his fame soared, so did his drinking. By the mid-70s, alcohol had a firm grip on him, and it all came to a head during the 1975 Country Music Awards. Rich was set to announce the Entertainer of the Year. What viewers got instead was one of the most bizarre moments in country music history. Clearly intoxicated, Charlie opened the envelope, then pulled out a lighter and set it on fire in front of a stunned live audience. No one knew what to make of it. Was it a protest? A meltdown? Just drunken chaos? Whatever it was, the fallout was immediate. His career never fully recovered. Bookings slowed, relationships crumbled, and the spotlight he once dominated started to dim. Charlie spent the rest of the 80s drifting further from the public eye. He stopped drinking for a while, released one final album, and seemed to want peace more than fame, but his body couldn't bounce back. In 1995, while staying at a motel in Hammond, Louisiana, Charlie Rich died from a blood clot in his lungs. He was 62. One of the most talented voices in country music, undone by the same fire he couldn't stop playing with. Section 4. George Jones, the voice that couldn't stay sober. George Jones had the voice, the kind of voice that could make a grown man cry or stop a crowd cold. With more than 160 charting songs over 5 decades, he earned nicknames like the Possum and the Rolls-Royce of country music. But behind that golden voice was a man spiraling deeper into chaos. His addiction to alcohol was no secret. It was part of his reputation. In fact, it got so bad that fans gave him a new name, No-Show Jones. He'd vanish before concerts, miss entire tours, or show up too intoxicated to perform. His talent was never in question, but his reliability? Gone. Promoters lost faith, fans grew frustrated, and fellow artists worried about how much longer he could last. And yet, he somehow kept going. Jones's battles weren't just with alcohol. He faced a lifetime of internal wars, failed marriages, depression, and the pressure of holding on to a voice that defined an entire genre. He'd clean up for a while, only to slip again. Each comeback was powerful, but each relapse was more brutal than the last. By the early 2000s, his health was in steep decline. Years of drinking had ravaged his lungs and heart. In 2013, at the age of 81, George Jones died from complications related to respiratory failure. The voice that had once soared was finally silent. Still, country artists and fans alike agree. There's never been another quite like him. And maybe there never will be. Section 5. Glen Campbell. Fame, family, and a fading memory. Glen Campbell looked like the perfect country star. Clean-cut, charming, and unbelievably talented. With 64 albums, over 45 million records sold, and a hit TV show, The Glen Campbell Good Time Hour, he wasn't just a musician, he was a household name. But behind the rhinestone suits and southern smile, Glen was unraveling. By the late 70s, his addiction was in full swing. Alcohol, cocaine, whatever numbed the pressure, he reached for it. His charming on-stage image couldn't hide the arrests, the erratic behavior, or the damage being done at home. He married 4 times, spiraled in and out of substance use, and even served jail time in 2003 after being busted for drunk driving and hitting another car. At his lowest point, Glen was spiraling publicly and fast. But he wasn't alone. His 4th wife, Kim, refused to give up on him. With her help, Glen cleaned up. For a while. He found his way back to music, back to family. But then came a diagnosis no one could fix. In 2011, Glen revealed he had Alzheimer's disease. The memories, the lyrics, the life he'd lived, all fading. Still, in one final act of bravery, he went on tour, performing even as the disease stole pieces of him night after night. It was raw, it was heartbreaking, and it was unforgettable. In 2017, Glen Campbell died at 81. Not from overdose, not from a crash, but from a mind that forgot the songs it once created. And yet, millions still remember the man behind the music, a legend who faced his demons head-on and sang through the silence. Section 6. Mindy McCready. Fame, fallout, and a final goodbye. Mindy McCready was supposed to be the next big thing. Her debut album, 10,000 Angels, went double platinum, and by the late 90s, she was a rising star with a voice that could cut through anything. But behind the scenes, her life was spiraling faster than anyone realized. Toxic relationships, legal trouble, and substance abuse became headlines, not her music. Her turbulent romance with Billy McKnight made waves when he was arrested for physically assaulting her. But that was just the start. In the years that followed, Mindy would be hospitalized multiple times for overdoses, depression, and multiple attempts. Each time she tried to come back, something pulled her deeper into the storm. She even appeared on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, hoping to get help. But the cameras couldn't fix what was broken. In 2013, tragedy struck twice. Just 1 month after her boyfriend, David Wilson, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the same house they shared, Mindy followed in a hauntingly similar way. She was only 37 years old. Her death sent shockwaves through the industry. How could someone with so much promise end up like this? The truth was brutal. She wasn't just fighting addiction or heartbreak. She was fighting everything: the media, the pressure, and herself. Mindy McCready's story is one of the most tragic in country music, a star who burned too bright, too fast, and left behind a silence that still lingers. Section 7. Spade Cooley. The legend no one wants to talk about. Spade Cooley was once a star, a Western swing band leader with movie star looks and a loyal fan base. He played to packed crowds and even appeared in films during the golden era of country music. But behind closed doors, Spade's charm masked something much darker, something country music rarely talks about. As his fame started to fade, Cooley's drinking worsened. He became paranoid, controlling, and violent. His wife, Ella Mae Evans, had enough. She filed for divorce and planned to take their kids, a move that Spade couldn't accept. What happened next wasn't just shocking, it was horrifying. One night in 1961, Spade snapped. In a brutal fit of rage, he beat Ella Mae to death and forced their 14-year-old daughter to watch. The details are too disturbing to repeat fully, but reports say he stomped on her, crushed a lit cigarette into her skin to see if she was still alive, and then tried to claim she had fallen in the shower. Even in an industry known for heartbreak, this was a nightmare no one could spin into a song. Spade was sentenced to life in prison, but incredibly, he was granted a 72-hour furlough in 1969 to perform at a benefit concert. It was supposed to be the start of his comeback, his big redemption story. But just after his performance, while backstage, he dropped dead of a heart attack. It was a fitting end to a story the industry has tried to forget, because unlike other troubled legends, Spade Cooley didn't just fall apart, he destroyed lives on the way down. Section 8. Johnny Cash and Hank Williams Jr. in the shadow of their own legends. Johnny Cash was a towering figure, not just in country music but across American culture. The Man in Black had hits, Grammys, and a rebellious image that made him a legend. But what fans didn't always see was the chaos backstage. His marriage to his first wife fell apart under the weight of constant touring, infidelity, and a brutal addiction to alcohol and pills. At his worst, he was popping as many as 100 pills a day, blacking out for hours, and destroying hotel rooms in drug-fueled hazes. Even as he found redemption with June Carter and leaned into faith later in life, the scars were deep. He battled through relapses, health issues, and diabetes complications that ultimately claimed his life in 2003. But the pain didn't stop with him, because his legacy cast a long shadow, one his own son would feel firsthand. Hank Williams Jr. was born into a myth. His father, Hank Sr., was already a country icon when he died at 29, leaving behind a legacy of heartbreak ballads and self-destruction. From a young age, Jr. was expected to follow in his father's footsteps, and that meant more than just music. By age 10, Hank Jr. was already being handed alcohol by adult musicians on tour. They told him it was part of the lifestyle. That pain was the price of greatness. As a teenager, he was performing his father's songs on national TV, imitating a man he barely remembered but was expected to become. The pressure nearly killed him, literally. In 1975, he fell nearly 500 feet off a mountain in Montana, crushing his face and almost losing his life. But the physical pain couldn't compare to the emotional weight he'd carried for years. After surviving the fall, Hank Jr. reinvented himself. He stepped away from his father's shadow, embraced a grittier country rock style, and fought to define his own voice. But that voice was forged through pain, addiction, and a brutal lesson that being born into a legend doesn't protect you from becoming its victim. Section 9. Tim McGraw and Trace Adkins. Cleaned up, but nearly lost everything. On the surface, Tim McGraw had it all. A picture-perfect marriage to Faith Hill, 3 daughters, a flawless country image, and chart-topping hits that made him the face of modern Nashville. But underneath the polished persona was a growing dependence on alcohol. He started drinking to calm his nerves before shows. Then it became a routine. Then it became a problem. McGraw later admitted that he was performing drunk, hiding bottles on his tour bus, and reaching for liquor by 8 a.m. He was spiraling, and it wasn't just his career at risk. It was his family. Eventually, Faith Hill gave him an ultimatum. It's the booze or your family, not both. That was the wake-up call. He chose his family, got clean, and never looked back. But for a man known for control, his story was one step away from collapse. And then there's Trace Adkins, whose spiral was far less private. In 2001, Trace checked into rehab after years of drinking nearly destroyed his career. It seemed like a turning point, until 2014, when things took a bizarre and very public turn. While headlining a country cruise to Jamaica, Trace got drunk and ended up in a confrontation with a Trace Adkins impersonator. The situation spiraled, and he left the cruise early to check into rehab again. But it didn't stop there. In 2016, while performing at a charity concert for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, Trace took the stage visibly intoxicated. Audience members walked out. Sponsors were furious. His reputation took another massive hit. Most artists would have disappeared after that. Trace didn't. He owned it, took responsibility, and this time, he stayed sober. All of it. The drunken cruise, the onstage disaster, even getting shot in the heart by an ex-wife years earlier, became part of his story. Not as an excuse, but as proof that survival sometimes looks messy. Both men made it out, but not before nearly losing everything that mattered. Country music has always been about pain, heartbreak, and truth. But for these legends, the stories weren't just lyrics, they were lived. Every drink, every relapse, every broken promise, it was all part of the performance behind the performance. Some escaped their demons, others didn't, but none of them walked away untouched. These aren't just cautionary tales. They're reminders that fame doesn't protect you from the darkness. Sometimes it invites it. So the next time you hear that old familiar song on the radio, take a second. Think about what it cost. Because for some of country's biggest icons, the price of the spotlight was far greater than anyone ever knew. And if you thought these stories were intense, wait until you hear the ones we couldn't fit into this video.